Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vaga Muradian here at the Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada, one of the world's leading gatherings of military, security, economic, political, and cultural leaders from around the world. And we're honored to have with us our host, Canada's Minister for National Defense, Harjit Sajjan, who has been good enough to spend some time with us again. Sir, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
A fascinating time for security around the world. Your public events, your private events has been really terrific. Let me start with the overall relationship with the United States. It's a very trying time. No two nations have a closer relationship. Longest unguarded border in the world. We even share the same area code, which most countries don't do. And yet, whether it's on softwood lumber, whether it's with the whole Bombardier issue, tensions are rising. There are the NAFTA negotiations. As the defense minister, are you concerned that there is a possible spillover to the exemplary relationship with the two countries that are integrally linked, whether in NORAD or any of the commands, and in the ways that Canadian and American troops cooperate?
I mean, our defense relationship is extremely solid. I have truly a wonderful relationship with Secretary Mattis. It's a privilege to call him a colleague. And I mean, our relationship is built. When you go back to World War I, World War II, Korea, Afghanistan, some of the other things that we've done. I mean, the work that we're doing in Iraq and NORAD. So we do have a solid relationship. We're also looking at even how we're going to foster that relationship even further, looking at how we're going to manage North American security as well. As any friends and any administration they've had, there's always disagreements, and we'll work through that. But when it comes to defense relationship, it's extremely solid, and it's a privilege to work with Secretary Mattis.
And so you're not concerned that any of this commercial stuff is going to have a spillover?
No, we'll always have a great relationship, because at the end of the day, both nations know that security is the number one priority for our countries. We work very closely together, and we will always continue to protect one another.
You came from the NATO ministerial. There's talk of an Atlantic command. There's talk of a logistics command. What are some Canadian views on it, and what kind of role would you like Canada to play in both of those organizations if they're set up?
Well, first of all, Canada's very proud to have an increased role at NATO. We've taken a leadership approach. We've outlined that in our defense policy. Multilateralism is important to us, and NATO is very important to us, and we want to support that. Now, we support the fact that we have a lot of good security initiatives, and especially from the enhanced forward presence. We've got a frigate that's consistently doing great work, air policing as well. And as we look at kind of getting into the additional resources that we have in the area, we need to modernize the command and control structure as well, and that's exactly what we're doing, creating a greater efficiency, and that's what any good organization does.
Let me ask you about the Canadian engagement in Latvia. You've got a battle group there, international component to it as well. What do you see next in the sort of continuing efforts the alliance has to deter Russia and to ensure the safety of all NATO members, especially those that are right on the Russian border?
Well, first of all, I think the next steps will all be determined based on the situation. Canada looks forward to being part of it, is helping to kind of improve upon NATO, and great work has already been done. I think the Secretary General has done tremendous work on this already, and to making sure that NATO is fit for purpose, not just for the threats of today, but for tomorrow. We need to send a very strong message to Russia, and a message of deterrence. When you actually put NATO resources together, it's quite significant. More importantly, we've demonstrated that quite effectively currently, and with the enhanced forward presence from our leaders making decisions where we want to go with the enhanced forward presence within 1 year, having full operational capability with not just a battle group. It's easy to move a battle group, but when you bring multiple nations together, the interoperability is quite complex, and our troops have demonstrated that. We have the political will as well, and we'll continue to send that very strong deterrence message. But we're always going to be open for dialogue as well, but we want constructive dialogue that's going to de-escalate things, and we call upon Russia to do just that.
Two-part question. One is President Trump has a new Afghanistan strategy. At the same time, the alliance, and there was the conference for violent extremism that the administration hosted, given that the ISIS campaign has been successful insofar as pushing everybody out. Canada's been a key member of that coalition as well. Talk to us on both of these fronts. What's next? What's next on the ISIS front, and what's next in terms of Canadian participation, and then what's next on the Afghanistan front? You're an Afghanistan veteran. Talk to us on both of those and what Canada is going to be doing in both of those on both of those campaigns.
First of all, I'm extremely proud of all our coalition partners, our women and men in uniform on the ground, and what the Iraqi security forces, what they've accomplished. 95% of the territory has been retaken. Pockets of Daesh do remain, so more work that needs to be done. More importantly, the training aspect, we need to shift some of our resources to the training so that the capacity building for the Iraqi security forces will be there, so that no other group can actually just come up like Daesh has done. And we want to prevent any new group from forming as well. So that looks at regional security. We have the flexibility to adjust our support. We just sent in IED trainers as well, because that's needed, not just to train the Iraqi security forces. Now they can go out and actually protect the civilians, because unfortunately and horribly that Daesh has left these type of booby traps that can kill or maim the civilian population. The great work that's been done also in Afghanistan, kind of extremely proud of the work that was done there by our women and men, and our police officers and many other agencies that were there. We don't have troops on the ground in Afghanistan, but we are supporting with over $465 million regarding for the Afghan security forces, for the development as well, which is also very important to do. But what we've decided is we're not going to put troops on the ground. We're going to focus on our efforts where we have troops. So this way, that's what a good responsible partners do. Look at the security threats and look at where each of us can actually put the right support. And that's what we're doing now. So we'll continue to focus on the efforts in Iraq while we provide the financial support in Afghanistan. And we support the great work that all the nations from NATO are actually doing there.
When you look at, you and your Chief of Defense, General Vance, have spent a lot of time thinking about what the fundamental approach we have to have as Western nations in conflicts like Afghanistan and in Iraq. That fundamentally the military part is a small part of it. And I've heard you speak very eloquently about, drawing on your experience as an undercover anti-gang police officer in Toronto, combating some of the most dangerous gangs in the country, where the solution was a lot more complicated, and it's not just a use of force thing. Yeah. So you're a soldier, but on this one you're also a bit of a scholar. How do militaries around the world need to fundamentally start to rethink the nature of the problem, where it's not a force application issue, which is what the public may demand, and politicians, I heap you in that simply because you are a politician and have the job, but what's the way we need to think about this? Because time and again we're finding that we're coming up short in trying to achieve these, and there's a lot of blood and treasure. No NATO nation lost more lives per capita than Canada did in Afghanistan. Talk to us a little bit about that.
No, this is one conversation we all need to have, is not just look at conflicts themselves that we come into when things have gone out of hand. So we need to deal with the threat directly, but we can never look at it just strictly from a military point of view. We have to look at it from a capacity building, from the police. We have to look at the development side of things, when displaced people as well. Because if you don't look at those things, the situation, could get worse, or it won't come to some type of stability. It's going to take longer. But more importantly, we need to also get better as nations and of predicting these type of threats and looking at the early signs and having intervention early. Now, what I mean by intervention doesn't have to be military. It could be political dialogue. It could be capacity building at the early stages. It could be just addressing grievances. And if we do that, I think that's something that would be extremely valuable for all of us, because we have enough conflict to deal with around the world. But there was only one caveat with that. When you prevent something from happening, there is no glory in prevention. So I think we need to look at our metrics and how we celebrate success in different ways. And we need to have an honest conversation about that. And I'm very fortunate to work with some tremendous colleagues and counterparts from around the world, including Secretary Mattis and other defense ministers. We are having those conversations, especially when we, the smaller group, for the counter-ISIS group that we get together, we do have these dialogues. And I think one of the reasons why we had a lot of the success is that we were able to make decisions quickly as political leaders, pass that direction down to our militaries. They've been able to have that success. So it's a back and forth, has worked, but we know that we need to do a lot more still.
And let me ask you a modernization question. All eyes have been on what Canada is going to do for its fighter procurement. Everybody, after the Bombardier suit was brought, because Boeing is cried foul and claims unfair advantage for unfair playing field. Everybody thought that it was looking like the F-18 was going to be the aircraft for Canada. There isn't an analyst in Washington that's not saying that airplane is now not in contention. You're the man making the decision ultimately. Is there any commercial, does the commercial thing spill over at all in terms of Boeing and its ability to be able to get work? And how much further along are you on refining this requirement, which was important? Canada was part of the Joint Strike Fighter program. You still are. You're still a member of the program fundamentally, but you haven't made the decision to go ahead. Talk to us about, sift the facts, the fiction, the BS from the truth on this.
No, actually, so when we announced our plan to replace our aging fighter fleet, it was a three-part plan. The first one was to actually have a proper competition so that we can build the requirements, have a competition, and then decide on what is the best aircraft for the Canadian Armed Forces that's going to provide the right benefits for Canada. So that's that competition, and the work has already started on that. Because of the age of our fleet, we needed to, based on the timeline of the transition that it's going to take, we need to invest in our current legacy fleet, and we're doing that now. So we'll extend the lifespan of that. But also, based on the numbers of aircraft that we had, we currently cannot meet our NORAD and NATO commitments simultaneously. And for our government believes that we should not be risk managing like the previous government did. We wanted to fill this gap immediately. So that's why we were looking at government on a Super Hornet. And keep in mind, this was for the interim gap. The permanent fleet replacement is going to happen with a competition, and replace the aircraft there. But the interim, we were going down a path, and then Boeing came up with this trade dispute, which we completely think is unfounded, and we asked them to publicly drop their dispute. And obviously, when our aerospace sector is under threat, we as a government are going to take some action. So we are looking at other options to fill that interim capability gap, and we will.
Can you be more specific?
No, we are looking at options with Australia right now. We'll see where the direction that goes. We're committed to replacing their entire fleet. In fact, actually, the previous government said they wanted to buy for 65. We're saying no, it's going to be 88. We're investing in the legacy fleet to extend that out, making sure that we have them for a much longer term. And more importantly, we're willing to invest in an interim capability to making sure we have enough aircraft for the Air Force so that they don't have to risk manage our commitments.
Let me ask you an innovation question. There isn't a defense leader that's not looking at commercial technology. Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Alphabet, is here at the conference. Nobody is embodying innovation more in many respects than the guys out in Silicon Valley. As you look at Silicon Valley, as you look at commercial innovation, what are some of the things that you're drawing into and is changing the way you and your team are thinking about security issues as you look at some available technology that you can then leverage into military gain?
In fact, as part of our defense policy, innovation is a very big component to it. And our defense innovation agenda fits into the wider innovation agenda for our government as well. But defense issues are very unique, and so we have worked with industry during our defense consultation. And what we now have is $1.6 billion over 20 years that I can use for defense innovation, where we're looking at a new approach where give predictability to industry to let them know what are the things that we were going to be looking at needing, so they can start putting some money into research and development. But more importantly, we want to start looking at competing problems, throwing problems out there to industry and coming so that they can come up with the various solutions. In some ways, there might be some already great work already happening, but they don't know that they can follow. So more, if they know what our problems are, right, we'll have I think a much better solution. So we are going to work very closely with the U.S. on this as well, to making sure that we work together and we don't create any redundancy for R&D when it comes to defense.
That's right, because we've talked third offset and innovation with the high north. Big focus. Everybody's talking about the Arctic. NATO is taking a look at it, but Canada has a slightly different view about what is high north, the role of the alliance. Northwest Passage is an internal waterway from a Canadian perspective. It's an international waterway from an American perspective. Talk to us how you're working with the United States on this, given that climate change, melt, is changing the entire dynamic up there, as we've heard from so many Canadian leaders over the years.
First of all, I mean, I think, as I said before, I got a great relationship with Secretary Mattis. We look at the security of the North, and it's in our defense policy that the Arctic is an important focus for us. But when we look at sovereignty, yes, we're going to be doing a lot of work when it comes to defense perspective, surveillance. But Canadian sovereignty is not just strictly defense. This is about supporting our people who live in the communities. So for us, it's a much more practical issue for us. Is how do we support our population that's there in terms of making sure that they have everything from bandwidth for internet, and making sure that at the time of their need for any type of crisis that might happen, we can support them. That's how we look at it. So for us, it's an entire government approach for the Arctic, because it is our sovereignty.
Sir, thanks so much again.
Okay,
Really
thank
appreciate it.
you so much. Okay,
Cheers.
nice talking.